And then Microsoft comes out and says, hey, there's another price increase coming July 1st.
Right.
So we were really good about talking about the 5% increase for customers that renew their subscriptions before April 1st, right? Remember we set the expectation last year that, hey, you're protected for a year if you renew now, but come 2026, you're going to see a price increase on certain core M365 products. And we thought we were done, right? All right, we're done explaining the price increase. And then Microsoft comes out and says, hey, there's another price increase coming July 1st.
Right.
So I think what I would like for you to explain is, what's the difference between the two, and then what do customers need to think about? Because now we've got like two bogeys, right, for customers, just as it relates to pricing. Go ahead and give me your thoughts.
Yeah, it's Microsoft right there. There's always daily announcements. It's like, where do you filter out the noise versus what pertains most to you? And then how can you strategize around this, next changes? Predominantly around pricing, right? We have a lot of clients price conscious, concerned about the economic environment, and part of the biggest spend that they have is with their Microsoft licensing. So with this new endeavor that Microsoft has, July 1st, it's really across all the board: enterprise plans, E3, E5, frontline plans, also looking at business plans, where you're going to see roughly 8 to 12% price increase on July 1st of 2026. Now, why that date is important is, even though you may fall into after and still have your subscriptions, of course, it's going to be determined on when that price increase affects you based on your renewal date. So a lot of renewals that we have, we tailored it as NCE season coming up, end of February, end of March, where we want to prepare for that. So part of the planning strategy is, can we lock in clients to avoid this price increase, and for how long? So initially looking at your yearly renewal, you avoid it at that time where you won't have to be concerned about it until 2027. However, if you want to lock in a longer term, that's where, looking at a 3-year arrangement that could still be paid annually in that case, would avoid it for the next couple of years afterwards. So now we're talking 2029. So it's a good thing to lock in and have that option if, it makes sense. And also, that's what we've been providing as far as guidance to clients, as well as, where can we help with license optimization, looking at reconciling licenses and going through that whole progress there that will overall provide the most cost-effective advantages as you move forward for your next renewal period.
Yeah. And Microsoft's end of year is end of June. So is it a coincidence that this whole thing is happening July 1st? And usually when there's a price increase on July 1st, or there's a change taking effect on July 1st, what Microsoft is trying to do, they're trying to concentrate some type of, volume or something like that around a certain promotion or offering like that before their end of their year. So that's probably one play. The other thing I can think of is there's a lot of enterprise agreement customers out there that typically renew their EAs right before the year ends, because that's when Microsoft would have thrown them additional discounts, incentives, whatever the case may be, depending on when they purchase their enterprise agreement, to compel them to get into the EA before their end of year, further, helping Microsoft, financially for their earnings. So all of that said, does this price increase have anything to do with EA customers? Is there a link between the two?
Quite possibly. I mean, there's no coincidence that Microsoft would do this on their fiscal year, right? Coming July 1st into their next fiscal year, so that they can also estimate, what their revenue return on to shareholders and, things of that nature. I think with EA clients specifically, around that push there, so we have evaluated that with current clients, if you look at price parity now with CSP, having a more flexible option, getting higher levels of support through a trusted partner like MicroAge, that we've been able to develop plans around those, looking at where, even from a cost perspective, right, EAs can be very costly as far as the alternatives to what we offer in CSP, and where can we also bring in, promotional items? That's the other thing. It's new to Microsoft 365 E3, E5. Where do those promotions come into play so that we can also help from a cost perspective? And evaluating too, it's always good to go through your licensing, your optimization, and understanding what users need really comes down to play, rather than just giving everybody an E3 license. It's where you can mix and match to get the most advantages, especially for EA clients, right? They may, have been locked into Microsoft 365 E5. While there's huge advantages there, I think part of it is the knowledge of the administrators that you have and getting the full capabilities so that you're getting the return on investment for what you're paying. And that's where, we come in with MicroAge and being able to help with the deployments of Purview, Defender, all the additional services, and then also knowing what you may not know that you're getting. One of the advantages of what Microsoft is offering when we look at Security Copilot, now including that with Microsoft 365 E5, that's going to be activated, and you'll be able to have those security compute units to utilize for natural language processing across your tenants. So looking at risky users in Entra ID or investigating Defender, and also be able to prepare an insightful report that you can take to the executive team around the incident. So it really creates the content there and the contextual capabilities depending on what you're looking to do, that Microsoft's really moving more towards those agentic AI agents. Think of the MCP services, the model context protocols and things like that, that really get more ingrained into not just looking at AI, everything on the web, but now they have a more focused approach on where the knowledge sources lie and what the best practices are.
Yeah. You've got a lot of information here on agents, and I do want to circle back to that. We were talking about the enterprise agreement because we deal with a lot of bigger clients, right? We also deal with high value, right, customers that are smaller, right? Let's call it the SMB space. But there was an announcement at Ignite around Copilot Business, and as soon as I heard the word business, I was like, aha, okay. So maybe provide a quick overview of how business plans work, even though most of our customers probably do that, and then. For me, it makes sense, right? There's an alignment there. There's a business type license. They did it for Defender. They did it for all the different business plans out there. There's a cap for number of users per tenant, depending on the plan. But I'm assuming Copilot is part of that story. Go ahead and run us through it.
Yeah, first of all, I'd say if you've never been to Microsoft Ignite conference, it is the echelon of going to an event.
It's a Super Bowl,
It really is. For anybody that's ingrained in Microsoft, I get excited. I'm passionate about it because there's so much news and it hits you so fast that at the end of it, you're like, wow, it's taking it all in. And that's where, a lot of people don't know, but Microsoft produces a book of news after Ignite, which is great to read. It's probably a 2.5, 3 hour read, but that's a really good catch up as well. If you haven't been able to attend the event to get a lot of insight there. So one of the big announcements, Rick, you hit me up when I was there, saying how do clients switch from, Copilot Enterprise to Copilot Business, and what is Copilot Business? So to break it down, I'll start off too. We look at how Microsoft has segregated some of those plans and given the different options between your business plans versus your enterprise plans and what the differences are and how do you break those down, but how do you capitalize on it, right? What is the best mix and match using those business plans and enterprise plans to get a cost-effective approach? If you do a, exact comparison, right? Business premium matches up very well to M365 E3, but you're paying, 20-25% less cost. Now with Copilot, and Microsoft's made a huge push, right? They're always, having really more of their own agents that they've deployed into your Microsoft 365 services being part of that announcement. But when you look at the business Copilot, so think of your Microsoft 365 Copilot, been an enterprise license, you're looking at roughly $30 a month for a user in that. And now there's this Copilot Business, Microsoft 365 Copilot Business plan. So this is really targeted for those SMB, SMC clients. Think of up to 300 users for a license. Same with Copilot. You can have up to 300 of those now. And at this point, there is no feature differences. They're the same outside of, you look at the standalone Copilot Business is only $21. So you are saving on that and makes sense, but you do have to be under business plans. It doesn't apply to your enterprise license.
Is there a minimum number of licenses or is as little as one?
It's as small as one license, but it has to be, the underlying license has to be there, either business basic, business standard, business premium, in order to have that Copilot Business license. And where Microsoft has too, going until the end of March, at this time it may be extended, but until March 31st is their bundled plans around business. So you can get additional cost savings bundling, your Microsoft 365 Copilot Business into your Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. So
I've got a compliance question for you then. Because Copilot Enterprise, you look at E5, you look at Purview, you've got everything you need from a data classification standpoint and identity access management standpoint in E5.
Right.
None of that stuff is really highly available. There's some of it in like Business Premium, not a lot in Business Standard, not a lot in Business Basic. So how is Microsoft positioning this Copilot Business license when they know there's a big gap there from a compliance standpoint
Yeah.
with the lack of Purview, right? What's the solution?
Excellent question. I think that it's always worth evaluating, right? Assessing your environment, understanding, where your data sources are before any, agent is used on the environment. So that's the key concept when you look at governance, right? Is first and foremost how compliant is your current data? Do you have stale information? As we know, SharePoint grows exponentially, and how are you controlling that around your stale information, which would then feed into these agents? When you break down the capabilities, right? Yes, there's a lot out of the box that Purview offers, even with Business Premium and having that, we'll call it that first plan one. They don't really call it plan one, but again, you start layering on even a Purview where you start getting more governance over how these agents are used with insider risk, things like that, that also then can apply those policies through Purview to monitor those agents, monitor those interactions. Are they pulling in sensitive information and then tailoring it to your organization? So even out of the box, right, Business Premium, you still have Purview capabilities. It may not be as extensive, but it's worth evaluating, right? Where is our security posture? What makes sense, especially around the additional capabilities of connecting other data sources with Purview and having that applied throughout there is a lot of huge advancements, and some of the enhancements that Microsoft has done even around Purview, where it's become more that enterprise level to be able to monitor your data and also apply policies, sensitivity labels, things like that. Where there are other options, out of the box, we're a great partner with Varonis. I look at that as the plug and play, right? You install it, you gain all that visibility. Where Microsoft and love their marketing, but they're really good at saying, hey, look at everything that you can do. What they're not so good at is like, hey, it takes all of this to configure these policies and set it up for fine tuning within your organization, which also relates to all these Copilot agents, right? It's now users can.
Perfect segue.
Yeah.
I was going there right now.
All right.
I got lots of Agent 365 questions, but you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, and you do an excellent job too, right? Our 1 minute expert. And I think that's the biggest key is like, what are you doing around users adopting the change and how are they taking the capabilities as you got this expensive licensing for them? Are they using it, right? That's the biggest question. Let's look at the utilization rate. Do we have a circle of excellence team? Somebody in front of them sharing the experiences of how they can use those out of the box. And even with Microsoft, look at, you have your Microsoft 365 Copilot capabilities. Now users can, be their own citizen developers and create their own agents specifically to what they're trying to accomplish versus, hey, they can get even more ingrained. If you look at Copilot Studio, let's look at automating some of these agents. And that's where, one of the biggest announcements with Microsoft at Ignite was Microsoft Agent 365, because now it's like they have an Entra ID associated to them so that you can actually govern all the agents that are being created in your environment. But also, more importantly, is you can see the risks associated to them. So where are the knowledge sources? How is it classified as a risky agent, in some cases? And then where can we have more control over these agents that are being created and start defining more policies around the agents and things like that? More to come too is, Microsoft always, agent modes in Excel, Word, where you can, bring everything together, which is fantastic, but it's like, how do we use this? It's part of it is like, what type of training are you doing around the users? And that's where MicroAge has a great, when you look at our Octum practice, right? Let us help you with these workshops and do these trainings and not only understand the risks involved, but also how do we gain the most utilization of these, agents for what we're paying for.
Yeah. I was surprised when I heard about Agent 365, but I'm also like, well, this is a no-brainer. I mean, of course, they're coming up with a way to treat agents almost as like objects within the tenant, and you need a place to monitor the activity and the success of them and the risk associated with, how they're being used. So this is great. And there's a whole slew of them. I want to talk about MCP servers here for a second. And I might just say go, right? Because you've got listed Azure Migrate Agent MCP with Azure Copilot AI guidance for connected workflows. I have no idea what that means. So I'm just going to let you go on that because MCP is becoming a buzzword, right? It's becoming like everybody's asking about it. We're considering, right, the use of it internally, even here at MicroAge. So Talk us through.
Yeah. So really to break it down, right? If you think of your large language models, it's always about the knowledge sources that they're connecting to. So if we connect, and you look at your Copilot chat connected to the World Wide Web, so what that's going to pull in is every relative textual thing based on what's being asked, and then it's going to retrieve those results and then give you an answer. And that answer may not necessarily be right, depending on how the question was asked. You can ask the same question. We've probably done this as well. You ask the same Copilot question, you might get different results, hallucinations, things like that. So when you look at the model context protocol servers, those, think of more fine tuning your Copilot and the model and how it vectorizes your search index that you can point to specific sources. So one thing of like technical documentation around your product and things like that, that you would have more control over, that you could then have that as a source information. So the easiest way is that only specifically points that agent to that controlled source of information so that when questions are asked, it's retrieved from that. So think of, Microsoft Foundry, and this is the other thing too. You look at this new terminology that Microsoft has around Foundry IQ, Work IQ. What does that mean when it comes to Fabric IQ? Think of that as being able to then take business intelligence. So understanding the context of what you're doing and asking and focusing it on that specific agent that now is more fine-tuned and ingrained within your environment rather than searching all the data sources out there. So those MCP servers specifically, think of that as really, around something that you might have created around Copilot Foundry, but within Microsoft, there's a lot of those that they're doing specifically for best practices. So think of migrating to Azure, right? That's always been a technical thing. You really need to evaluate those, and what are all the options, as you can deploy things in many different ways, but what is the best way to do it from not only a cost-effective approach, but also from an overall, when you look at efficiencies, scaling, growing, that now these 5 specialized agents that are kind of been announced and released. And I had the opportunity of working in a lab of looking at the capabilities around, deployments to Azure. If you have a web application, things like that, and you're like, hey, I want to move this web app, to Azure. What are all the things that I need to think about and do as far as tasks involved? And can you do this? And going through and assessing the environment. Now it's great. It gives you a ton of information, gives you a really good analysis of it, but where it still doesn't lead to is that human response, right? You still need somebody with expertise to know, like, hey, do I really need, Azure DDoS services around what I'm doing, and look at the costs involved and things like that. So it helps having an expert like MicroAge to come in, and we've done this for a lot of clients. While these agents are significantly more helpful in getting the context of what you're trying to accomplish and giving you a good game plan, we'll call it, it's still not the one that's going to be like your best team approach, right? You still need somebody to help you on those. And some of the capabilities too, looking at, observability, the optimization part is we always get, hey, how do we control our costs in Azure? What do I need to do? That it now brings it to the forefront of, hey, if you have an underutilized VM, for instance, let's look at, changing the size of it and help saving on the cost. All of these things, that we would do through our managed services, helping to provide clients that additional layer of expertise, and value around it.
All right. So we've got a few more minutes here. And there's another piece to what we're doing at MicroAge, at least on the Octum side of things, around Microsoft Fabric, right? And this is a hot topic right now too, especially for IT. We have relationships with IT, so we probably have these conversations more than we do with business leaders around things like process automation and, AI initiatives and those types of things, but it's something we handle. I saw Copilot in Power BI, and I was like, whoa, we should probably talk about that, because Copilot is expanding their ecosystem a little bit. So when we say it's available in Power BI, we should probably talk about what the prerequisites are for something like that and what it actually does. So maybe take a second on that if you can.
Yeah, Fabric is probably one of the most exciting topics, even for me. It's like, as I've gotten more involved in understanding, the services involved, and think of that as really a consolidation of a lot of different Microsoft services that now is in, it's charged based on capacity units. And before, you'd have different levels between F2 all the way to F256. And what does that mean is it really allows you to not only consolidate your data sources, number one, having closer availability to that for your business analysts and things like that, where Before, F2 was kind of the minimum, but in order to have Copilot in Power BI, you needed F64. Now
Hmm.
that's changed to where your business analysts can utilize Copilot as they might be trying to create a report around business data and analytics that are stored within one lake and using data warehousing, also looking at Databricks, whatever data source option, and even having mirroring to Snowflake or other data sources. So really what it does is it aggregates your information and also allows you to apply policies, that you may have for classification and sensitivity and things like that, where your whole process, ETL process, right? The extract, transform, load becomes more of a medallion infrastructure around your data. So you have the raw data brought in. Once you transform it into, a way that you can analyze the data, then you have that gold layer where business analysts then can take it and maybe use Copilot, around it as like being able to structure a report, which will help them, with when it comes to creating content. But the power and capability around Fabric, especially when you have disparate data sources and having one here and there and having the aggregation of it is hugely valuable in getting a standardized way to understand your data and being able to bring the business more value based on the data that you have.
Yeah. And way to cover the medallion architecture there too. There's a platinum layer now too.
Is there? I haven't heard of that one.
Oh, it's setup
There could be
setup and configuration, best practices for AI based analytics. So
makes
there's,
sense.
there's that extra,
Layer to it. Yeah.
let's focus on best practices there too. And, our senior data architecture, Tim Erickson, he started talking about that. I was like, there's a platinum. All right.
Right.
That's cool. I was just getting the bronze, silver, gold thing, but no worries.
It's cool knowing. I think one thing, right, is knowing the knowledge and things like that. But as we go to market, right, it's how do you take actions against this? Like, okay, you explained Fabric and everything else sounds great. Now what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part where I think a lot of them trial and error. Like same with Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's like, oh, this is really cool. Let me try it out. it's the try before you buy experience. However, that can also lead to science projects, right? You see that all the time around Azure. Is let us help you when it comes to the planning stage. The more that you invest in planning and strategizing, the better the game plan's going to be. So I think that's where we bring the additional value of, hey, now that you have an actionable plan, you know where your data sources are and understand the concepts around Fabric and what it can provide. Let us help you create that plan to go and deploy this in a safe, governed, compliant way where you have all the controls in place. You understand where you're getting the most value, benefits, optimizing costs, things like that we can come in and help with.
Cool. If you're a customer out there, how do you engage MicroAge?
Reach out to your account executive. If you don't have an account executive, you're more than happy to reach out to me through LinkedIn, through my email address.